Hi, welcome to today's Understood Chat. We're going to be talking about how motor skills affect learning and making friends. We're very excited to have Priscila Caçola with us today, and she is an assistant professor in the Department of Kinesiology at the University of Texas at Arlington. So, Priscila, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and talk to our parents. Could you start by telling us just a little bit about yourself?
Sure, absolutely. So I am an expert in motor development and developmental coordination disorder. So I teach the kinesiology department. I teach the motor development courses, and I also do research in children that have issues with motor skills.
Amazing. We are so lucky that you are here with us today and sharing that knowledge and learning with our parents. So we're just going to kick off with a few kind of starter questions, but before we do that, I want to talk to everybody who's watching. First of all, thank you for joining. We appreciate you watching. If you have questions, you can drop them in the chat box to the right of this video screen, and we will get them in line to Priscila as soon as possible. So if you have questions about what we're talking about and things like that, please let us know. In the meantime, just drop your name and let us know that you're here, that you're with us, say hi. We're really excited to have everyone here and watching, so thank you. The first question we're going to start off with is there a name or condition associated with the movement and motor skill issues, and how common is it?
Right, so there is actually, and it's called developmental coordination disorder, and we know it as DCD. And DCD is very common. In fact, it's one of the most common neurological disorders in childhood. So we can say that it's, maybe up to, some stats say that it's up to 7% of school-age children. Some stats will say even a little bit more than that, like 10 and 15%. So that's a lot of kids. Developmental coordination disorder is a disorder of poor motor proficiency, right? And that's despite having all the stimulation and the experience for you to learn motor skills. Kids that have developmental coordination disorder will have their academic life and daily living skills impacted by having poor motor coordination. So that's important. It's not just a clumsiness in the sense of I'm not very skilled, I'm not just very good at sports. It's really affecting motor skills. It's affecting academic achievement, and it affects how children interact with the environment.
Thank you. 15%. That is a big number. That affects a lot of people. So I think we've got a lot of parents in the room who know what we're talking about. I want to ask another question that kind of lays a little bit of groundwork before we dive into the parent questions, and that is, what are some physical symptoms associated with dyspraxia or DDC, and can I use those two terms, dyspraxia and DDC, interchangeably? Right,
so let's start with symptoms. So, I use the word clumsiness, and it's not a great term, but we need to use that as a general term for example, having trouble with ball skills, or picking up objects, or moving really fast, walking, writing, especially drawing, tying shoelaces. A lot of the kids that I see have trouble with that, riding a bike, bumping into furniture. We see kids with DCD having trouble with negotiating the environment around them. Keeping still sometimes might be an issue as well. Hopping, jumping, running. So all of those skills may be associated with symptoms of DCD. It's important to know that it's a very heterogeneous condition. So not everybody's going to have problems with ball skills. Not everybody's going to have problems with balance. We see problems in this general areas: balance, manual dexterity, and aiming and catching skills, but we don't need to have all the three as a rule.
I think that I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. I think those are really helpful things for parents to start noticing, and just in case parents weren't following, I did ask two questions, so to help, I'm going to ask the question again. So we've just talked about that, tying shoes, bumping into furniture, not always, but things like that are things they could keep an eye out. And we've been talking about motor skills, DDC, and then I asked, can I interchange DDC with the term dyspraxia?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so technically no.
Okay.
So it is used interchangeably, and that's okay, except that DCD is in the DSM, so it is a recognized term, and it has very clear criteria for DCD to be diagnosed. So while dyspraxia is used by the community, and we think a lot of times it means the same thing, we prefer to use DCD because it's recognized. So I would encourage, especially parents and that are working with schools, to really use DCD to use that foundation of the DSM for the diagnosis.
That's a really helpful tip. We've already got some questions rolling in, so I'm going to dive right into them. This one's a little bit long, so bear with me as I read it to you. This comes from Frustrated, and they said, how do you get school personnel to recognize this? My son has DDC, dyslexia, and anxiety. School feels he has a hard time participating because kids don't like, and that's in quotes, the way he kicks the ball, and not that he is anxious to, and now he's anxious to join in groups on the playground. And so this person also just added a correction to that question that said, the school thinks it's his anxiety and not his gross motor issues, and that that's the anxiety is affecting how he interacts with kids, not the DDC. And he's asking, how can he get the school to realize that DDC is probably a contributing factor in that as well?
Right. That's a great question, and I would say you're not alone. So most parents are going through exactly the same thing. Is DCD is associated with comorbidity, so the dyslexia, ADHD, and others is very common. Anxiety and other psychological difficulties are typically a consequence of DCD. So, well, of course, if you know that you don't perform well, you're going to be anxious about it. And I think the most important thing to do is to seek a diagnosis, and to and if that diagnosis is developmental coordination disorder that is grounded on the DSM, there's no reason why the school wouldn't recognize that. And if the school wants to do that, please contact me. I'll be happy to help you with that. But look for a pediatrician. A developmental pediatrician would be ideal. Maybe an educational diagnostician or a psychologist can help with that diagnosis. Sometimes the school doesn't have the right personnel to do that. So maybe it's if they can't do that, maybe you have to seek for that diagnosis outside. But they definitely need to provide accommodations for the motor skill problems. They do cause anxiety, but if the kids can get some help with writing, or like why really would they need to kick a ball in front of everybody? So I think all those things need to be accommodated, and they should.
Thank you. I hope that helps our frustrated parent out there. And as always, I want to remind parents that we're getting answers in the question right now, but if you want to dig deeper, there are tons of resources on understood.org, and we have a parent community where experts like Priscila spend time answering questions as well. So you've got lots of options outside of today's chat. This next question comes from S, and S says, how do you distinguish this from motor challenges related to sensory processing disorder?
Ooh, that's a great question. Thank you for that. Honestly, it's very hard to distinguish, because if there is a sensory processing disorder, it will most likely affect motor skills. But the most important thing is that we distinguish simple motor challenges as, for example, I'm not very skilled, and motor challenges that really affect daily living and academic achievement. So if there are problems that are affecting how a child is performing in the classroom and how the child does homework and performs the homework, that's really important. Then we really want to see that as a disorder. Now, if sensory processing disorder is either causing or being associated with DCD, it is a little bit harder to dissociate. But I'll tell you that a lot of children with DCD also have sensory processing issues, so they tend to go hand in hand.
Thank you. So we have a parent who joined a little bit late, and she was just wondering if you could do a super quick reminder on the definition of DCD and what it stands for.
Right, of course. A general definition is of developmental coordination disorder is it's a disorder of poor motor proficiency despite experience and the stimulation for motor proficiency to develop. This is also associated with typical cognitive skills and also a neurological dysfunction, right? So we see those motor problems, but we don't see a neurological condition explaining motor skills.
Great.
Problems.
This next question, I think, is one that will apply to a lot of parents out there who might be wondering if their child has DCD. This comes from Sunny, and Sunny asks, who can diagnose DCD?
That's a good question. So technically only physicians can, but it's historically DCD has been mostly evaluated, I would say, if not diagnosed, by occupational therapists, psychologists, educational diagnosticians. So however, if you really want to get accommodations in the school system, I would say definitely bring it up to a physician, developmental pediatrician. Sometimes they may ask for outside evaluations, but they're really the only ones that can diagnose.
Thank you. So parents, get in touch with those pediatricians if you're seeing some of the signs we talked about earlier with your kids. Just a note to the parents who are watching, if you're asking your questions, if you can include either a grade or an age of your child, that also can help us tailor our answers to you even better than we are right now. Our next question comes from Kate, and Kate would like to know, how do schools accommodate for DCD? I can see how it can be accommodated within phys ed, but is there anything that can be done out on the playground or in other places in the school?
Yeah, so lots of things actually. And keep in mind that DCD is a very heterogeneous condition. So the accommodations will be very individual to the child. The most common accommodations are related to handwriting. So, for example, they may need to handwrite a little bit less than another child. They might be able to type instead of handwrite, or even spell, or even use a voice recording system. I've had children that just recorded their essays, for example, because it wasn't about the writing. It was about really coming up with a nice essay. Some of the kids may be allowed more time to perform those tasks in the classroom. So they may have to handwrite something, but they may have a little bit more time. They may have paper that is special, that has a larger space in between the lines, that maybe some papers with, like a piece of paper that has a boundary so they know where to stop, the letters, that's helpful to kids as well. Most of them will go around handwriting because that's the main issue in there. But we can do things with physical education too. Even in the playground, it's just maybe being a little more mindful of safety issues, for example, because, if they have trouble bumping into things, they could fall and get hurt and then be scared of trying again. So maybe be more mindful of that. But it's a fine line between accommodating, but also encouraging a little bit so the kids can improve to their potential.
I loved what you said at first when we were talking about accommodations, that they're going to be very individualized to each kid. We talk a lot about that in Understood, and especially in our community. Parents will often share, what's the most surprising accommodation that you have in your IEP for kids to spur ideas. But it is working with your teacher and the teams that work with your kid to try and figure out what will help them improve best. And like you said, not just accommodate them, but actually help them grow and learn. So I love that you said that. We have questions that are just rolling in. So the next one is coming from Claudio, and Claudio asks, what are exercises that we can do at home to help with DCD?
Ooh, that's a good question. So it really depends on what you want to accomplish. So typically, if you want to improve skills of children with ACD, you need to focus on strategies for them to accomplish the task. So, for example, if you really want them to tie their shoelaces, if that's important, and I think it is, it's about independence. You can come up with, maybe a little song that goes with with the shoelaces, or you can come up with tips and cues that will help them understand that they're supposed to go one way and then the other, and then tie and then cross. So I think it's really breaking down the tasks and coming up with strategies that can help them understand what are they supposed to do and what are the steps. So, it's nice to maybe they can do like balance things. They can walk on a line and things like that. But I would prefer that parents really work on the skills that the kids need to be better and find strategies that work for the kids. This is going to depend on the age of the kid or their interests. But this idea of creating strategies, thinking about the skill, breaking the skill into steps, and actually thinking about even after they're done with that skill, did they do it correctly? What can they do, better next time? I think those are great ways to help your child.
Thank you. This next question comes from Jules. And Jules is curious about kind of comorbidity that we touched on a little bit before. And Jules asks, are ADHD and slow processing connected to fine motor skills, output issues, and is that what affects handwriting?
So I'm not sure about what slow processing as a disorder would be, but I have to tell you that ADHD is commonly comorbid with DCD, or the opposite, right? DCD is commonly comorbid with ADHD. About 50% of children with ADHD also have DCD. Now, think about this. To perform an accurate motor skill, you would need to attend to that skill first. So it's possible that the attention issues are also affecting the performance of the motor skill. Now, it is possible that a child with ADHD only would have problems with motor skills just because they can't, at that time pay attention to really, finalize the skill. But what we see that I would say I would like to at least to have every kid with ADHD evaluated with DCD just to see if that's their major problem or not.
Yeah, 50%. That's a number that really surprised me when you said that. So I think that
is very high.
Yeah, it's good for our parents to know that, though. Our next question comes from Nick, and he is asking for recommendations for his 14-year-old son. And how does he feel part of the group when his friends want to do a pickup basketball or football game? The son's default is just to not participate, but then sometimes he's isolating himself and feels left out.
Right. So, first of all, I can completely understand that concern because ultimately motor skills they're important for academic achievement and they're living skills, but really being able to use motor skills to belong in a group is what most concerns me because children and adolescents with DCD have been shown to have high anxiety, high depression rates, and they are at risk for mental health problems. And I think this sense of belonging is important. And I'm not sure how to answer that question in the sense of giving you the strategy for that. But I think that at that age, it's possible to maybe be open about the topic, and maybe if the friends are open to understand this difficulty and maybe try other skills that maybe really that maybe your son does really well, because that's the important thing to remember about DCD, that those kids have many other skills. And maybe he can fit in a group, or even bring that up to the group, the things that he's really good at, because I'm sure there's a lot of things that he's really good at.
I think that you hit on a point that we talk about a lot here at Understood, that the kids that we are talking about often do excel in something else. They have incredible imaginations, or they become great entrepreneurs because they've learned to think differently, things like that. So really having conversations with kids that you might not be the athlete, but that doesn't mean that you're not incredible at this, and you and your friends can engage in maybe it's strategy and board game night or something like that.
Sure.
And I also think, too, we've had conversations about that. Is there a way that he can participate by maybe not playing the game? Can he have the role of team manager, or does he want to play the scorekeeper thing? So get creative.
Absolutely.
Not everyone plays on a basketball team, but is there something else that he could do relating to the team or that friend group that still makes him feel involved?
All right, that's great.
This next question comes from Cindy, and Cindy has a first grader who is 6 years old, and she's wondering how to work with handwriting skills and suggestions for things she can do to help her child's handwriting.
Right. So most of the kids that come to me, or even for a diagnosis, they are about that age, because we have, handwriting starts to be really needed in the school system, and they have had enough time to develop their skills. I think it's important to think about the fact that as kids tend to see handwriting as a really difficult task. So just making them do handwriting over and over again is not going to help. They're just going to be more stressed out about it. So it's really finding tasks that maybe promote manual dexterity or other fine motor skills. So games that involve, like, for example, pegboard, picking up a peg and placing in a pegboard. So really things that can help them, stringing beads that can help their fine motor skills, that can transfer to handwriting later. And then maybe coming up with strategies like I mentioned before. So maybe dotted lines that they can practice, or, a paper that has different lines and it has a kind of a space set for capitalized letters, and that can help them understand the differences between the two types of, the two different heights they can use. I think I'm hesitant to give general directions, because I would rather see what's the real difficulty of your child, and then how we can help your child too. Coming up with songs, coming up with rhythm, things that can help them with timing can be very helpful as well. But also, sometimes one of the ways to help with handwriting is help them express themselves. Like a lot of the kids that I have seen in many years that I've been working with DCD is that they're so creative and they have so much to say. So a lot of times is allowing them to express whatever it is that they want to say, and then somebody can type it for them, or we can record it, and then later on they can kind of transcribe them. So what I don't want is for handwriting to be a limiting factor for them to express everything that they have to say,
That's an incredible point. I think kids do often feel a little bit isolated if they can't get things out the way that they're told is the way that it should be done, when there could be other opportunities to allow them to express themselves in other ways. I'm going to go back to something you said right when you began answering that question. You said that's the age that many people come to you, and that leads right into our question that comes from a user named Diverse, who asked, does DDC affect preschool children? And I'm going to even add on to that myself and ask kind of what are the ages that you start seeing it, and is it something that kids deal with all through school?
Actually, delays in early milestones is part of the criteria for diagnosing DCD. So these kids would tend to have delays in crawling, walking, and other major milestones. So you would see that much earlier. Now, it is important to allow kids to have a little bit of time to develop these skills, because kids develop at different rates, right? And so the most important thing to do in the preschool years is to really make sure there is a lot of opportunity for motor skill development, right? So stimulation, opportunity, and really enjoyment of motor skills. Having said that, it is possible that there will be a diagnosis, maybe by about age 4, 5. What I see is typically 6, 7, because that's when parents realize, or the school actually realizes, that is affecting academic achievement, right? So even though kids may be a little bit different, it might not affect them until they actually get to kindergarten, first grade.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Our next question comes from Mallory, and this is touching you said developmental milestones, but Mallory is asking, can you give examples of maybe social cues that kids might have trouble following with DDC? Her child is in 3rd grade and is 8 years old.
Social cues. So what we see in children with DCD is difficulties in social skills because they are aware of their motor skill problems. So this is very different than most other conditions that we talk about. There seems to be a high level of awareness, and they know that it's important, that the motor skills are important to engage with a group or with whoever else. So maybe some of the social cues are some hesitation to perform motor skills, maybe trying to be away from the group, finding other things to do. I do have a clinic in my university for kids with DCD, and what we talk about is that the kids are wonderful at telling so many stories and kind of going around the activity that they're supposed to perform because they know they can't perform very well. But they also know that they're very good at other things, so they're just so creative and they will talk to you about everything else that they did. And then once you realize they haven't done the activity that they're supposed to do, that will improve their motor skill. So I think some of the social cues are that hesitation, maybe avoidance of, motor skills, even like simple motor skills like, writing, and also maybe even sports skills.
That makes a lot of sense. We have time for one last question. So if you haven't had your question answered, I really urge you to go to u.org/community and put your question in there, and one of our other experts will be able to help you get an answer there. But in the meantime, I'm going to ask this last question that I think could apply to a lot of parents watching, which is, can OT or PT benefit kids with DCD? And when we say OT and PT, that's occupational therapy and physical therapy. So can that be beneficial for these kids that we're talking about today?
Yes, absolutely. So, and in different ways. So occupational therapists are really great at coming up with the skills that the kids have trouble with, like writing, and coming up with strategies that work for the kids. So I think, it's recommended, that there is OT involved. Physical therapy can help kids improve strength, agility, balance, postural control that can significantly help their skills as well. One of the things that I would be cautious is that most of this therapies are done individually, and kids with DCD excel individually. I always try to encourage parents to seek for group activities, even though it's difficult. Sports teams, sports skills and teams are complicated. But I think that sense of belonging, that we were talking about this before, is really important. So definitely OT, PT, even at the same time, but also maybe looking for group activities, anything that they can engage with the group, would be great as well.
I think that's great advice, because we are talking about making friends and how, this can sometimes be a hindrance, but there are definitely ways and things that you can do with your kids that help them move forward both socially and with their motor skills. Do you have, we're coming to the end of our time, do you have any last words that you'd like to share with parents who are watching today?
Yes, so this goes back to the first question. I think it was a frustrated parent. I just wanted to know that you're not alone, that it's there's, unfortunately, we have a large number of children with DCD, and a lot of them goes undiagnosed because, it passes as ADHD, as, sometimes behavioral problems, right? Well, the kid is not cooperating, or anxiety, or things like that. Maybe, I know it's hard. I know it's not something, sometimes you go to a pediatrician and they don't know what it is, but it's okay. I mean, there is a lot of resources out there. try to find a developmental pediatrician, especially or a pediatrician. Ask questions. There's a large community. I think seeking for a diagnosis, if you think your child has DCD, parents are the best at that. So, look for testing. There are accommodations, and there are many, many ways to succeed. So it's going to get better.
I love those words of encouragement. There are many, many ways to succeed.
Yes.
To everyone watching here today, thank you for taking the time to join us. We appreciate it. We do these chats on a regular basis, so please go to u.org/calendar. You can see what events we have coming up and what experts and topics are on the docket. If you missed the beginning of this chat, or if you want to go back and review some of the things that we talked about with Priscilla, it will be archived on u.org/calendar as well. Check back later today or tomorrow, and you should find it there. If we didn't get to your question, I apologize. We have limited time and lots of questions, but I do encourage you to go to u.org/community and join our parent groups. There are tons of parents and experts in that space talking about just these topics, and it's an incredible way to learn from other parents who are going through it with you. So thank you again, Priscilla. Thank you to everyone who's watching, and have a great day.
Thanks.